Let's begin with a structural overview. Welcome to another lecture. Today we address the Normandy landings of 6 June 1944, a subject in which logistics, deception, and human resolve intersect in a way that is, arguably, without parallel in modern warfare. I am Professor Alexei. We shall proceed methodically, but I promise the occasional dry smile where appropriate.
So, hello everyone. I am Priyanka. I will be asking the simple questions that, are sometimes the most revealing. Thank you for having me, Professor.
To frame our discussion, it is important to understand a few definitions. Operation Overlord was the Allied plan to establish a large lodgment in Northwest Europe. Operation Neptune was the amphibious and immediate airborne phase that opened the door. The objective was a beachhead across 5 sectors on the Normandy coast: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Behind them, airborne forces secured bridges, causeways, and key terrain to prevent counterattacks from crushing the assault at the shoreline. In this context, we also meet specialized terms and tools. A beachhead or lodgment is the secured initial area from which you expand inland. Mulberry harbors were temporary artificial ports to mitigate the lack of major French ports in the assault zone. Hobart's funnies were specialized engineered tanks designed to clear mines, bridge ditches, and demolish bunkers. DD tanks were amphibious tanks intended to swim ashore just ahead of the infantry. The bocage was dense hedgerow country, and Rommelspargel were booby-trapped stakes set to impede gliders and paratroops. Deception, under the umbrella of Operation Bodyguard, misdirected German attention to Norway, and especially to the Pas-de-Calais. Fortitude South even created a fictitious army group under General Patton, with convincing radio traffic, dummy equipment, and carefully curated leaks.
Actually, before we go too deep, I want to ask something simple first. When people say Neptune versus Overlord, can we say that Neptune is the opening move and Overlord is the whole campaign through the breakout? Is that fair?
Precisely. Neptune is the violent door opening. Overlord is everything that follows to hold the door and move the furniture in, if you will. To put the naval scale in perspective, about 6,900 vessels took part, including roughly 1,200 warships and about 4,100 landing craft, with about 196,000 naval personnel coordinating minesweeping, bombardment, transport, and control. Mathematically, orchestrating such a fleet in time and space is a constraint satisfaction problem that would make a railway planner weep, and yet they did it before breakfast. Moving forward, why were the stakes so high? Opening a Western front was essential to compress Germany from 2 sides. It initiated the liberation of France and shifted the strategic balance in the West irreversibly. Allied deception meant German senior leaders remained fixated on the Pas-de-Calais. Reserves were held back, and authorization for panzer countermoves was centralized, which slowed their response on the day when hours mattered. Allied air dominance, the product of Operation Point Blank, ensured that about 9,500 Allied aircraft outmatched roughly 800 German aircraft over Normandy. German reconnaissance and close air support were thus constrained from the start.
Isn't it interesting how weather, deception, and radios can weigh as much as tanks? It makes me wonder how much of the outcome was decided before dawn by those choices.
Let's start with the history. 2 surprising anchor points, then the chronology. First, as stated, this was the largest seaborne invasion in history by vessel count. Second, Fortitude South put General Patton at the head of a fictitious 1st United States Army Group, with genuine 21st Army Group radio traffic rebroadcast from Kent to enhance the illusion. German analysts found that hard to ignore even after 6 June. Chronologically, we observed pressure for a second front from June 1941. By August 1943 at Quebec, Normandy was chosen over the nearer Calais because it offered broader maneuver and the chance to threaten Cherbourg, Brittany, Paris, and later Germany. Mulberry harbors were conceived to offset port shortages. On 31 December 1943, Eisenhower and Montgomery expanded the assault from 3 to 5 divisions, plus 3 airborne divisions. This delayed the operation to June for additional landing craft. As we continue turning to meteorology, on 4 June, Allied forecasters under Group Captain James Stagg detected a brief improvement for the 6th. German meteorologists, lacking Atlantic data, expected prolonged storms. Many commanders attended war games in Rennes. Rommel himself was away. Eisenhower chose to go on the 6th. The severe storm of 19 through 22 June retrospectively vindicated the decision, as the next tide and moon window would have been disastrous. Shortly after midnight on the 6th, turning to the opening hours, airborne operations opened. At 0016, British glider troops seized the Caen Canal and Orne River bridges intact. To the west, the U.S. 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions dropped to secure Utah's exits and key crossings. Scattered by cloud and flak, they still captured Sainte-Mère-Église and held critical causeways. Deception continued in parallel. Dummy paratroopers fell near Le Havre and Isigny. Radar-confusing chaff simulated ghost convoys off Le Havre and Boulogne. Around 02 o'clock, with many coastal radars previously destroyed, German recognition of the Armada was still incomplete. Authorization delays for 21st Panzer persisted until roughly mid-morning.
Can we maybe note the air numbers again? The scale always surprises me. Like 2/3 RAF, and the Luftwaffe could not really contest the skies that day.
Indeed, about 9,500 Allied aircraft operated, versus roughly 800 German aircraft positioned over Normandy. This disparity limited German reconnaissance, interdiction, and close support. At sea, minesweepers opened channels. At 5:45, bombardment began. At 6:30, the Americans landed. Utah drifted south of its planned zone. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., ashore early, famously said, "We will start the war from right here." Engineers blew gaps. About 21,000 men landed at Utah, with about 200 casualties by day's end. Omaha was another story. Many DD tanks sank in rough water. Bombing largely missed due to cloud. The 352nd Infantry Division defended forward. Casualties were about 2,000. Destroyers closed to deliver point-blank gunfire. By midday, lanes off the beach were opened. On the British and Canadian fronts, Gold, Juno, and Sword confronted strong points and urban resistance. At Gold, naval fire disabled most guns of the Longue-sur-Mer battery early. Specialized engineer tanks reduced stubborn positions such as Le Hamel later in the day. Commandos moved on Port-en-Bessin, which fell on 7 June. By 12 June, all 5 beaches were linked, forming a continuous lodgment from which the Allies could expand inland despite bocage that slowed movement. Allied casualties on D-Day were at least 10,000, with about 4,400 confirmed dead. German losses are estimated between 4,000 and 9,000, the variance reflecting disrupted records and the fog of war. Before we turn to our larger questions, a brief personal note. I study strategy and deception with the same quiet satisfaction I take in a difficult chess endgame. You see, The Normandy enterprise is a case study where timing, feints, and tempo matter as much as brute force. The documents, to some extent, read like a score by Shostakovich, precise, layered, and with ominous silences in all the right places.
So yeah, moving on. I think the next thing we should talk about is why Normandy rather than Pas-de-Calais. It seems counterintuitive to avoid the shortest crossing.
This logically leads us to big question one. Normandy was chosen because the broader front offered better prospects for expansion and maneuver, threatening Cherbourg and the Brittany ports while enabling an overland drive on Paris. The Pas-de-Calais was closest to England, yet most heavily fortified. Its terrain narrowed options for breakout. Deception amplified this calculus by fixing German eyes on Calais. The fictitious army under Patton, dummy sites, and manipulated radio nets sustained the belief that Normandy could be a feint. It is worth noting that even after 6 June, Patton remained visible in England until early July, prolonging German caution about committing reserves toward Normandy.
I'm curious about the fake army. How effective was it in practice? Did German commanders really keep forces back because they expected the main blow at Calais, even after the landings were underway?
We can infer considerable effectiveness. Fortitude South routed genuine 21st Army Group radio traffic through Kent, giving German listeners a consistent picture of real signals in the wrong place. Dummy paratroopers and radar chaff created phantom activity on the night. And crucially, Hitler held several panzer divisions under his own authority. On 6 June, 21st Panzer's full release lagged until around 0900. Local commanders improvised but could not mass decisively. German High Command even convened on 6 through 8 June to consider North Sea defenses, a sign of continued uncertainty. In simpler terms, the chess pieces were not allowed to move when the clock started.
To shift gears a bit, what if the weather had not improved? Big question 2. If the invasion had been delayed, what then?
It is crucial to understand the constraints. Planners sought a near full moon for airborne navigation and a rising mid-tide so that beach obstacles were exposed, yet not so high as to strand craft. That yielded a very narrow set of dates. Stagg identified a window on the 6th. The next acceptable tides arrived around 18 to 20 June. The storm of the 19th through the 22nd would have rendered initial landings impossible. Mulberry construction would have been jeopardized, and the armada dispersed across the Channel would have been at risk. Delaying weeks would also have degraded deception credibility, strained logistics and morale, and granted the defenders time to repair radar and reposition. Counterfactually, we cannot assert defeat with certainty, but the probability distribution shifts toward higher Allied casualties and possibly a postponed or reconfigured operation with reduced airborne components.
Maybe the best place to begin is by asking the question within that. If the window had closed, did planners have an alternate mode, like fewer paratroops, or different tides, or even another coastline?
To elaborate, contingency discussions existed, but each alternative eroded key advantages. Removing airborne elements would expose beaches longer to counterattacks. Landing at high tide would conceal obstacles, risking catastrophic craft losses. Selecting another coast would nullify months of tailored deception and detailed hydrography. In conclusion, the Allied meteorological advantage, derived from Atlantic weather stations, was a strategic asset. Without the 6 June window, prudence might have forced a postponement with materially worse prospects.
Building on that, big question 3. What challenges remain in fully understanding D-Day's logistics? We have the big numbers, but where do the uncertainties still live?
Several. And they are not merely academic bookkeeping. First, micro-level reconciliation of unit timings, landing craft cycles, and beach throughput remains incomplete. Beachmasters' logs, naval dispatches, and infantry war diaries rarely align to the minute. Second, quantifying the comparative efficiency of the mulberry concept versus open beach unloading under varying sea states is difficult, especially given the storm damage later in June. Third, specialized armor effectiveness varied beach by beach. Rough seas blunted DD tanks at Omaha, whereas close shore launches elsewhere paid dividends. Encoding those variations into a single causal model remains challenging. Fourth, the German side presents gaps. Their casualty figures range from 4,000 to 9,000 on 6 June. Fragmented records and subsequent withdrawals obscure precise losses. Finally, interdiction effects invite deeper quantification. French resistance actions cut rails and power. On 6 June alone, 52 locomotives were destroyed in the southeast with hundreds of rail cuts. Normandy was effectively isolated by 7 June. Translating that into exact delays for specific German formations would benefit from network analysis of timetables, bridge strikes, and fuel constraints. In simpler terms, we still lack a single unified stopwatch for a battle that spans sea, air, and land in overlapping waves.
From a different angle, future research could fuse sources, maybe digitize beach logs and radio nets, align them with tide tables and weather reanalyses, and even use image analysis on reconnaissance photos to map obstacles and lanes. Does that sound reasonable?
Speaking of methods, yes, a multidisciplinary approach is apt. Agent-based simulations for landing waves, graph models of rail interdiction, machine vision on aerial imagery to detect beach obstacles and mulberry components, and cross-national archival synthesis across the 8 participating navies. This, then, is how we refine a picture that is already well drawn in outline, but still awaits finer shading.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. The definition is clear. Overlord as the whole campaign, Neptune as the assault, 5 beaches, airborne on the flanks, deception at scale, and weather as a strategic variable.
To summarize, we examined why Normandy over Calais, noting maneuver space and deception. We considered the counterfactual of delay, where tides and storms narrow options and risks multiply. And we outlined open questions in reconstructing logistics with precision. For those interested in the present day, it is worth noting that deception remains integral to modern doctrine, though the mediums have evolved from dummy tanks to digital signatures. Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Priyanka, for the incisive questions.
Thank you, Professor. Maybe that's something we can come back to later. Goodbye, everyone, and good luck with your studies.